Last week in Michigan politics, with roads still a top concern here in Michigan, and with what some have described as a funding cliff just a few years away, Governor Gretchen Whitmer unveiling a multi-billion-dollar plan to fix them. But will Republicans, with their own plan, accept it? We take a look. Plus, would Kent County ever consider becoming a sanctuary when it comes to immigration? Members of the public weigh in on what they want the county to do. And snow days aplenty so far this winter, how state law may factor into how some schools choose to use snow days going forward. I'm Josh Alburtus, and this is your 13 on Your Side Rundown. And we begin at the state capitol. This week, we learned about Governor Gretchen Whitmer's latest plan to fix the state's roads. She released her $3 billion proposal, with Republicans responding quickly.
If we don't find a solution, our roads will get worse and more dangerous.
And now, nearly 1 month after giving her Road Ahead address, Governor Gretchen Whitmer saying she has a Road Ahead plan.
Speaker Hall has said roads are a priority. He said his caucus wants to keep working on this, and so do I.
In an announcement Monday, Whitmer's office unveiling a $3 billion plan for road funding. The plan includes seemingly dedicating more sales tax money paid at the pump to go toward infrastructure, $250 million for local bus services and new transit projects, and cost cuts that her office says would generate $500 million for road and bridge funding. But will her plan pass the test in the new Republican-led State House?
I appreciate the governor's willingness to address this issue. It is such a critical issue facing the state. We can agree that we need that amount of revenue to deliver.
But the head of the House's Transportation Committee saying there's still some big differences compared to Republicans' $3.1 billion plan announced last month.
I like our plan much better. It doesn't call for a tax increase, but it delivers a significant amount of revenue to the transportation fund, which is desperately needed.
Whitmer's plan calling for things including now having the marijuana industry subject to wholesale tax, which is already put on products like cigarettes. It also calls for what the announcement described as requiring corporations to pay their fair share to do business in the state and use its roadways. While the announcement didn't specify what potential taxes or policy levers would be used to do that,
it's going to be very, very tough to convince my Republican caucus that we need to do this with raising taxes.
But given the state's new divided government and what many have described as a looming funding cliff at the end of the decade, negotiation will have to be a priority for either side looking to get to a viable solution.
1 week from now, big changes are set to come to the state's tipped wage and sick leave systems following a court order last summer. But as some have said, some of those changes could devastate their workplaces. The legislature is making a last-ditch effort to reach a compromise. Senate Bill 8 passed the chamber Thursday. Currently, the law allows employers of tipped workers to pay them 38% of the full minimum wage as long as tips make up the rest. Where the changes set to come into effect include phasing out that tip credit altogether and raising the minimum wage to roughly $15 an hour by 2028. Some say the changes from the court would lead to increased costs for businesses and cost workers their jobs. Senate Bill 8 would raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2027, while making seemingly a middle compromise by raising the tip credit percentage to only 50% by 2031. It's almost 2 years since Michigan's hands-free driving law went into effect, but is the new law having an impact on drivers' habits? We heard from local law enforcement and from a Michigan State University researcher as MSU unveiled some of its first numbers.
Anytime your eyes come off that roadway, you're distracted by something.
And in the case of using a mobile device for certain things while driving, it's not just dangerous, it's also illegal in Michigan.
The hands-free law is coming up at the end of June in year 2 of it being implemented.
The law that took effect in June of 2023 made it illegal to use a mobile electronic device while driving for things like sending or receiving calls or texts or checking social media unless it is hands-free. Certain things can also still be done as long as they are done with a single tap of the device.
The days of warnings are probably gone.
And as the 2-year mark approaches, researchers at Michigan State University unveiling the results of a survey that gauged how device use while driving trended during the first year of the law.
What we saw is about a 1.2 percentage point decrease in the number of drivers using handheld devices in 2024 compared to 2023. That might not seem like a large number, but when you consider that Michigan has approximately 8 million licensed drivers, that translates to approximately 96,000 fewer drivers using handheld devices if we extrapolated that out throughout the state.
But those who did use devices while driving, researchers found tended to be of a certain age.
What we found was that drivers under the age of 30 were approximately twice as likely to use a handheld mobile device compared to drivers aged 30 to 59, and were more than 6 times as likely to use a handheld device compared to drivers age 60 and above.
It's similar to the group MSP has sought to home in on based on their findings from 2022 to 2023.
A lot of the distracted driving crashes that we are seeing, 16% of that are from drivers ages 16 to 20.
It's why they hope to focus on younger drivers as they continue enforcement.
It starts with us, that we have those respectable, law-abiding driving habits, and then hopefully those around us will do the same thing.
With tariffs on aluminum and steel announced by President Donald Trump, Michigan's auto industry is once again facing potential disruptions after an earlier initial dispute with Canada caused concerns across the supply chain. We spoke with an industry expert on Monday about what these tariffs may do to Michigan's auto industry. Here's what he had to say.
As you can imagine, automotive uses quite a bit of both of those commodities. As a commodity, there's obviously implications, and it would add to certainly some pricing pressure, especially for the automakers and suppliers. Now, whether that would end up translating to price at the sticker for a consumer, I think there would be some of that upward pressure, but it's a different level of magnitude than the prior tariffs we were talking about.
And with candidates already confirmed or rumored to be entering races for the 2026 midterm elections, a new poll is giving one of the earliest looks into what voters think of their potential options. In Epic MRA's first poll of the year, the pollster gauged respondents' opinions on potential fields for governor and U.S. Senate, among other things. In the race for governor, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, an announced Democratic candidate for the seat, tied Republican businessman Dick DeVos in 31% apiece, with Detroit Mayor and independent candidate Mike Duggan getting 23%. And in the Senate race, former Congressman and last year's Republican nominee for the state's other U.S. Senate seat, Mike Rogers, pulling ahead of Democrat and former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg 47 to 41%. We have not yet reported DeVos, Rogers, or Buttigieg as having officially entered these races. The Kent County Republican Committee's Executive Committee has decided to censure former County Commission candidate Derek Anderson following recent posts on X featuring Nazi imagery. The committee also took action to take away his ability to participate in party activities. The party was investigating if they could legally remove him from their executive committee, where, as of earlier this week, he sat under state law as a winner of one of the previous year's primary elections. And also in Kent County, the debate over turning local areas into sanctuaries for immigrants, including those who may have entered the country illegally, continues here in Kent County. We looked at the debate during Thursday's County Commission meeting.
As the 1-month mark of President Donald Trump's administration approaches, immigration crackdowns have sparked pleas like these.
Do not do the work of tyranny for itself. Do not look away.
On Thursday, people speaking at the Kent County Commission meeting on whether they want Kent to become a sanctuary county for undocumented immigrants.
For years, the Board of Commissioners has consistently followed Standing Rule 3.10C, which prohibits the consideration or approval of non-binding resolutions.
But that didn't stop the debate, with some feeling actions can be taken, including limiting county law enforcement's ability to cooperate with federal immigration agents.
Engaging in any kind of activity that would support the apprehension, detention, and deportation of folks we think is unjust.
While others believing sanctuary policies could hurt the county and its citizens.
We are concerned that they could hurt the least among us, those most vulnerable in our communities, by jeopardizing federal funding for programs, for judicial programs, for housing, for education programs, safety, public safety, economic development.
It comes as the State House took action this week, changing its rules. Now it won't take up any legislatively directed spending for things like counties, cities, or universities that have rules or policies subverting federal immigration enforcement or that refuse to comply with enforcement measures.
The resolution that we're passing today is structured so that the municipalities, county governments, city governments, townships that are harboring illegal immigrants, that they don't receive additional funding outside of what is constitutionally required.
Whether the rule change in the House would impact a place like Kent County seemed to be a question. In a letter Tuesday, the county administrator's office wrote in a joint letter with the sheriff that ICE has approved Kent County's detainer process and that the legislature should ensure communities like Kent County are not unfairly impacted. When we reached out to the city of Grand Rapids, the city manager said it has not declared itself a sanctuary city and they hope to have continued collaboration and funding support from the state.
Vice Mayor St. Clair?
Yes.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes.
This week, the Muskegon City Commission voted to approve more than $150 million in state funding for the transformation of the historic Shaw Walker Building. After the project developer presented how this will offer community benefit and affordable housing, the commission approved state funding that would reimburse more than $159 million of the more than $212 million project. This brings the process one step closer to that state help. 13 on your side's Julia Gorman has the story.
The bones of the building are super strong.
John Rooks with Parkland Properties is itching to get going on the transformational construction of the former Shaw Walker Furniture Factory in Muskegon.
So this will be a 20-person hot tub?
The goal right now is April or May, with demolition work costing about $5 million underway right now.
This is what it looks like after we sandblast all the lead paint off and we remove all the wood floors that were rotting.
The 15-acre site will have almost 600 units to live in, including apartments, condos, and townhomes.
We'll leave these raw in the building so that the unit residents can enjoy the history of the building.
What'll be known as the Shaw will offer rooftop pools, jacuzzis, clubhouses, sports courts, and retail space.
We're keeping the smokestack to tell the story of the building as a historical memento to the historic use as a furniture factory.
Apartments will be built first.
We've collected over 200 names that are interested in these 69 condos.
And Rook says the plan at this point is for some units to be move-in ready by the end of next year.
We can help solve the housing crisis. We've created a unit mix that really attacks the missing middle issue. We're very happy to be part of it.
The next step for that money from the state for the project is approval from the state board in April. A website for the Shaw is in the works. And in the dead of winter, snow days are something some kids might be wishing for every day. But as it's already had to happen several times for many schools, they're running out of how many days the state gives them. Coming up, how state law may factor into how some schools choose to call snow days in the future. On snowy days, many students dream of a day off from school. For area superintendents, there are several factors to consider before canceling classes. It's the perfect example of how politics touches so many parts of our lives, as the state says schools can only have a certain number of off days for things out of their control, like weather, that count toward their time requirements for the year. So how could that be factoring into the decisions as some schools run out of their given days? We asked some.
Here in the Great Lakes State, snow days may be fun for many students.
I just went to a game and they, had a nice time communicating to me about the forecast and all of that.
But for in-person public schools, it comes with deep consideration.
No, it is not an easy decision at all, and it takes a lot of time. None of these snow days are taken lightly.
Here in Michigan, state law says schools can only cancel 6 days for reasons out of their control and still count them toward the required 180 days for their academic year. 3 additional days could be possible with approval from the state superintendent.
We have a days requirement, we have a minutes requirement, so it just depends on where we fall short. Sometimes you have to add days, sometimes you have to add minutes to the current days that you already have scheduled. Yeah, as a school district, we've had 4. We had 2 individual schools that also had an additional day of cancellation.
And at nearby Northview schools.
At Northview, we have used our 6 days.
And in Holland, the district saying on its website it had used 5 snow days so far this year, as it announced it would consider calling 2-hour delays instead of full snow days for the rest of the academic calendar when safe to do so. So as more weather was set to approach Wednesday evening, considerations were being made.
It's always safety. We want our students here. We do not want them at home when they're supposed to be with us. So if it's safe to bring them in, we want to bring them in.
Quite frankly, no matter how many days we've used or how many days we have left, if it's not safe, it's not safe. So we would go ahead and make that decision. That may leave us, at the end of the winter time scrambling to figure out what it looks like in the spring and potentially even into the summer. But ultimately, if it is not a safe day to come to school, then we're not going to have school.
The city of Grand Rapids no longer has free sled libraries at its parks. The program began last year at 3 parks as a pilot project, but did not return this year. 13 on your side's Alexis Dumergine explains.
We're here in Richmond Park, where GR outside sled libraries have officially ended. After months of providing kids with free sled gear, the sleds are now gone and the stations will no longer exist.
What I think ended up happening is some people would take the sled for the winter, or they may have stolen them as well.
Last winter, the city of Grand Rapids offered free sled libraries. The initiative allowed kids to sled down the hills using sled gear that was provided by GR outside.
The sleds themselves, we did an experiment last year where we created a library where people could come and use them without staff.
A spokesperson for GR outside, part of the city's Parks and Recs department, told us they believe some of the residents might not have understood the concept.
And it probably didn't work the greatest. Some people would take the sleds, and we think they kept them for the entire winter. They may not have understood the process.
GR Outside has reworked its programs, now aiming more for organized group activities.
So we kind of refocus that into making them more targeted trips for people now, where they can call a gear library and say, we want to do a sledding trip, and then it's more of an organized event for any youth group. And it's still free of cost.
GR Parks and Rec said that you can still rent snowshoes and fat tire bikes at the Indian Trails Golf Course in Grand Rapids. In Richmond Park, Alexis Dumergine, 13 on your side.
And that's the rundown for your week in Michigan politics. Be sure to keep up with all the top political stories of the day, both on air and online at 13onyourside.com. We'll see you next week.